here today representing Highlands Lines Enterprise. I've already made contact with quite a few groups here about the Scottish Land Fund. I'm part of the Community Assets team, and we're a specialist team within High charged with helping communities to acquire land and land-based assets. And those land-based assets can include sporting rights or mineral rights, mooring, renewable energy rights, so it's not just pieces of land and buildings. We work very closely with our colleagues in the Strengthening Communities team, led by Kerry Grant at the front here, most of you will know. And we can help groups establish and become constituted. We also provide support, advice and mentoring for trustees and directors. So if you're just thinking about a project and want to set up, we can help you with support and advice and also funding for that. Through our Maximising Community Assets programme, we can arrange seminars and exchange and knowledge transfers with other groups. So if you know about a project that's going on somewhere else, we can help you with the funding to go and visit them, talk about what's worked and what's not worked. And we also work very closely with our colleagues in DTA Scotland and COS to provide support for groups that are interested in buying land and land-based assets. So, community land ownership, don't need to tell you this. Community has control over land and land assets. That can be all sorts of different things. Water, building, minerals, sporting rights, woodlands, all of which to be managed for community benefit. So a lot of areas will already have community action plans, and we'll be looking at talking to you to say, what assets do you need to develop and deliver those community action plans? So we've been doing that already with some groups. We're happy to go and talk to all the groups in Argyll and Bute and look at your action plans and say, are there particular assets, whether it's either through the council process or private land held by other public sector agencies, are there assets that you think would help you deliver your community action plans, and we can help you through the process of approaching the owners, looking at feasibility studies, etc. The key principle is very similar to what Karen was talking about with the lottery funding, is that for groups to be eligible for Scottish Land Fund and Highlands Lines Enterprise support, they've got to have open membership. So they must be open to all members in the community, must have community support, benefit and control, so they need to be controlled by the community, and they must be non-profit distributing. So just skip through some statistics. Community land ownership. Almost 500,000 acres now in Scotland are in community ownership, and the government's recently set a target of 1 million acres by 2020, which, given that it took almost 90 years to reach the first 500,000, we've got our work cut out over the next 7 years. But there are lots of factors in place now to help us achieve this ambitious target. As we heard earlier today from John Swinney, there's a lot of government support for the policy for community land ownership. There's funding. Karen and Diane and Lorna, myself, all telling you about the opportunities available for capital and revenue funding. And there's also the community right to buy provisions, which most of you are probably aware of, and colleagues were here today from the community right to buy branch of government, where you can register an interest in land, and if that land comes onto the market, then the owner has to talk to you about the community taking it on. So turning now to the Scottish Land Fund, it is actually Scottish Government funding, all part of their drive to develop community land ownership. It's Scotland-wide, so we've also got advisors in Perth and Edinburgh. There's £9 million available over 4 years, but it's across the whole of Scotland, so I'm really keen to get as much of that as possible into Argyll and Bute. And it's delivered by Highlands Lines Enterprise in partnership with the Big Lottery. That's in recognition of High's long-standing work with communities across the whole of the Highlands and Islands in developing projects. We've got really good contacts with lots of community groups, pretty good knowledge of local issues, and it's also recognition obviously of Big Lottery's role. They've got the Scotland-wide presence and fantastic experience in helping communities grant awards and grant administration. The first round of the Scottish Land Fund 2006 was very successful. We'll talk about one or two of the projects that were delivered through that. As a result of that, again, the government have put another £3 million and extended the fund for a further year. So final applications are now 2015. So, aims: support rural communities to become more resilient and sustainable through the ownership and management of land and land assets. I think we're all for that. Types of project. acquisition of land or land assets. So I said that can be as broad as forestry, where there are issues over state aid there, energy opportunities, mineral rights, buildings, moorings, land. We're quite open to talking to you about any ideas you've got. Sorts of project ideas that we're working on at the moment with groups, particularly in Argyll. You will know that many of the community action plans identify affordable housing as key to developing communities. So we're looking at projects where communities can acquire land to develop affordable housing, and that can either be in partnership with a housing association, or the community could develop it directly themselves and manage it. Land for amenity space, so I've been speaking to a couple of people today about things like extensions to village halls, playing fields, sports fields, that sort of thing. Land for renewables projects, strategic assets, so things like shops, fuel stations, talked about the one up at Applecross, hotels, pubs, subject to being no local displacement. That's the critical factor there. But if there is a strategic asset locally that the community are desperate to retain, which looks like it might be in danger of closure, then again that's something we can talk to you about to see whether or not it's something that's fundable through the Scottish Land Fund. Some of the projects that we've supported so far focused on tourism and heritage development. So the Scottish Land Fund already has for some reason acquired 2 lighthouses, or we haven't acquired them, the communities have acquired them using SLF funding, but that's all focusing on developing tourism projects in local areas. So these are the sorts of outcomes that SLF are looking for: increased and sustainable economic, social and environmental development. Economic is key, must deliver economic outputs. Most of the projects we're looking at are doing that. Other outcomes: empowering rural communities, giving them greater control over their own development, volunteering, and generating sustainable income. It's all about making rural communities more resilient. SLF has 2 strands: capital and revenue. Capital funding, this is to acquire the land or the land-based asset. It provides funding of between £10,000 and £750,000 and can, very unusually, can fund up to 95% of the cost, including legal and professional fees associated with the acquisition. It's a single-stage process, and if properties come onto the market, it is capable of a quick response. It does meet that the SLF board is an independent board, independent of government and lottery and high, but they can meet if there is a particular property that comes onto the market, and we can get an application in fairly quickly. SLF can also provide revenue funding. This is specifically related to development of the project relating to the land. So if you acquire a piece of land for affordable housing, then you can also apply for revenue funding of up to £50,000 over 2 years, and there we would see that revenue funding be used perhaps to appoint a project officer to develop the housing project, so work with the housing association, get the grant funding to deliver it, work out the housing allocation policy, get the houses built, get them let. It can also cover things like community engagement, planning and feasibility costs, or any detailed engineering costs. It's really flexible in terms of what the revenue funding can do, but it needs to be able to be delivering the project that you're acquiring the land for. Again, coming back to the eligibility, it does need to be an open membership, and it does need to be geographically defined. So coming back to Antonia's point, unfortunately, like GCA, it's not for communities of special interest. And the approach for SLF, the initial inquiry is too big. I think within the information packs that are left through there, it's got all the details. So
thank you.